So I want to talk about Dune 2. I am going to go into spoilers. So if you haven't seen the movie and you don't want spoilers, maybe get out of here for like 5-10 minutes. That's probably the amount of time that I'll kind of deep dive into it and get into it. But went to watch Dune 2 yesterday in the movie theater. And there's a lot of hype around this film, right? You know, people talking about how it's like the next Empire Strikes Back. People talking about how it's maybe one of the best science fiction movies ever made. And when you go to a movie that has that kind of hype, that has that kind of buildup, you go in with expectations. You know what I mean? And you sort of expect to be blown away. And I will say this. I had what I consider pretty high expectations. They were all met. And I think the hype around the movie is real. Like the hype is well earned. It's real. This is an incredible movie. I think it's better than the first movie. It's also doing more than the first movie. This is a like really complicated narrative. Like there's a lot going on here. And there's stuff that Denis does that I think you can just appreciate on like the surface level. There's stuff that thinking about it as I was watching, I was like, damn, like that's really crazy. Like the way he uses time in the movie is fascinating. There's a lot of moments that sort of end and then a scene starts that has clearly had a passing of time. And it's just it fits really well together where you never sort of lose it. You're never like kind of taken aback. You understand clearly that time is passing. Truly like masterful stuff from like pacing, the character perspective, really brilliant stuff. So I think it's a masterpiece. You know, frankly, it's a masterpiece. The performances, oh my God, I gotta say, I think this movie might have the best just grouping of performances that I've ever seen in a film. It's somewhat centralized on certain characters and a lot of other characters are somewhat ancillary, and yet every single one of these characters really brings it. I think Rebecca Ferguson, maybe the best I've ever seen her in a movie. She does something in this film that's I've never seen her do before, where there's a turn, right? This is after she drinks the water. And she goes like pretty crazy. And I totally buy it. It shows her range. It's amazing. You know, she was a very calculated, well put together person in the first movie. And she begins the second movie like that. And then there's sort of an event that happens and she's like a changed person. And I totally buy it. She was incredible in that. I was like, wow, that's very strong. Florence Pugh, also, maybe the best I've ever seen Florence Pugh. That might seem like weird to say because she plays it pretty straight in this film. But there was something about the choices she made in delivery and the sort of nuance and even the way that she holds her face. There was just something about that performance and that character that's very intriguing, fit the world really well. You know, I had heard in an interview leading up to this movie that Florence had said she wanted this role and Denis kind of tried to like talk her out of it, where he was like, oh, it's not that big of a role. Like, you're not really gonna be doing much. Like, you don't have to do it. And she was like, no, I really want to be a part of this. I don't know where that comes from because she literally opens the movie. She's the same character in the old Dune, the David Lynch Dune. She's the same character that opens that film with that weird kind of narration at the beginning. And I thought that was kind of cool because they opened this movie the same way. And she's fantastic, dude. Somewhat reserved, but fantastic. Like, just fits it perfectly. Christopher Walken, big question mark for me. Big question mark for me because he's Christopher Walken. And I mean, Christopher Walken is like such an iconic performer, but his cadence is so specific, right? That, you know, I think a lot of, there was a movie with Sean William Scott and Dwayne The Rock Johnson called The Rundown back in the day. Christopher Walken is a villain in that film. And I constantly think back to a couple of lines from that movie that are just like, to me, quintessential Walken. Like there's that one where he's like, do you understand the concept of the tooth fairy? You know what I mean? And it's just like that very Walken thing. And so I was like a little bit nervous. You know, I was like, oh shit, is it gonna walk in all over this? He does a little bit, but I was actually surprised that in some sort of key important moments The cadence was different, felt serious, and it doesn't like break the movie, right? Which was something I was genuinely concerned with. Javier Bardem, absolutely incredible. Zendaya, incredible. Although I will say, with Zendaya, I really buy her as like the snarky, scorned, abrasive person. When she plays the softer, caring, loving person, I actually don't buy it as much. And I know that's a bit of a change from the books, right? She's not as combative in the books from what I understand. Probably a good move to change that in the movie for a number of reasons. One is because Zendaya's performance in that is way more believable, right? Timothy himself, I love. And, you know, there's some debate, like I've seen some reviewers and some people talk about how when Timothy makes his turn, you don't necessarily buy it. All I can speak for is just my authentic experience. I totally bought it. I was like, dude, when he makes that flip, I fucking bought it, dude. And it was a powerful performance, like really, really good. And he sort of, the tone of the last third of the movie after he makes that switch is very impressive. It's very dark. It's very subtle. It's nuanced, which I really, really enjoyed. Austin Butler, holy shit. Austin Butler, so good. And you know, it was funny, I was having this conversation with Elisa as we were leaving the theater. She said she liked the fact that he didn't play like a pretty boy role, because a lot of times like actors like that are just known for being good looking, they sometimes will sort of typecast and they won't get a chance to show like the raw talent sort of outside of the Hollywood looks. You know, Austin Butler is this weird albino looking psychopath, but he nails it. Like he really carries that portion of the movie strongly. And I could just go on and on. It's like every single person came with their A game, and it's a testament to Denis to be able to pull these performances together and layer them together in this movie in such a way that it's like a feast. It feels like a feast of cinema. Like everything you're looking for, every part of it is working at like this very optimal level. It's very, very cool. Again, the other thing that's interesting to me about this movie is that it's so dense. Like it's so dense. There's so much that's going on. There's a lot of things that are explained, this huge passing of time, this complete other chapter with the Harkonnens and his chief rival, the Bene Gesserit, and them sort of playing with the Emperor, playing with these two possible messiah kind of figures, right? So there's like a lot going on, and yet it feels like there's no wasted space. I never feel like it's lagging. Every scene is driven by the characters and the conflicts and their desires. So it's just kind of like top to bottom, functionally a masterpiece. When it gets into the last third and gets into the real like war movie, when it becomes like an actual war movie, man, what an impressive amount of visual effects, incredible action sequences, all culminating in this big fight between Timothy and Austin Butler. Austin Butler representing the champion of the Emperor. And, you know, this is a moment where Paul Atreides is, you know, basically finding the Emperor guilty for the crimes of, you know, conspiring against his father and destroying House Atreides. Really big, awesome, meaningful moment there. Really cool with all the subtext, with, you know, him saying that he loved Zendaya's character, but then basically forging forward with marriage to the Emperor's daughter for political purposes. Just so much going on and operating in that scene. And it feels very cathartic. You know, I think the feeling I got towards the end of that movie was of catharsis. You know, beginning in the first movie and watching Paul and his whole family disappear and all of that, to the buildup in the desert, to him kind of like being the reluctant hero / war criminal, horrible leader, dictator thing, was fascinating. And then there's real catharsis at the end, you know, for the Atreides. Maybe less so for the Fremen, because you kind of outwardly understand that their faith in Paul is sort of being leveraged and creating, you know, a holy war in his name, as he predicts in the first movie. So like a lot of closed loops, a big amount of catharsis, and yet an incredible amount of intrigue to where it goes next. The houses are gathered. There's this holy war that started. So pretty fantastic stuff. I really did love too the inclusion of the sister, of Paul's sister. And again, I'm not super big on the lore and the mythos of Dune. But from what I understand in the books and in the original Lynch movie, this sister comes into play much later, and she actually is the one that kills the Duke. And I think she kills the Duke like as an infant or something like that, right? And so I thought it was a fascinating change to give the sister sentience in the womb via the water, and that thereby sort of warping the timeline of the books and of the original movie in order to have this sister character be a part of the narrative in this present time. Again, it's like, I mean, it's a fucking masterpiece, dude. Like, that's all I can say really is like, it is masterfully done where, in my opinion, even the changes are operating to make it a better narrative, a better movie going experience. And I think it's truly fantastic. So I would say 10 out of 10, fucking masterpiece. I can't wait to watch it again. I want to watch the first movie again. I'm very excited for the next movie. And so that's kind of my raw review of Dune 2 and just some of the stuff that I loved about it. And I can't say enough good things about the film. But again, I do want to get into, in the next segment, I want to sort of explain why I also think, for as good as the movie is and for as successful as the film will be, Dune is not going to change. Dune's not going to become a new IP that's large in scale, that's big. There's certain things within this movie and within the Dune mythos that I think will prevent that. And just as like sort of a slight example of what I'm talking about, when we walked out of the theater, there was this lady that walked out and she was like sort of distraught and really did not like the movie. And she was asking people around, like, guys, I gotta know what you think, you know? And we sort of stopped and talked about it a little bit. It was kind of interesting to me. This random lady that was like, oh, you know, really needed to talk about it. But it was kind of in that moment I had this feeling of, well, this shit is not gonna be for everybody. And this shit is not gonna be the next Star Wars. So I want to talk about that next. But as far as the movie itself, masterpiece, dude. Absolute masterpiece, and I can't wait to see it again. So